welcome again. Today's seminar is on transforming manager to leader, the difference between management and leadership. And I'm going to give a brief background on the Federal Leadership and Professional Development Seminar Series. Just starting out here, unless otherwise noted, no statement during today's workshop should be construed as an official position of any federal agency. And as Dale noted, today's seminar is being recorded and will be available on YouTube in a couple weeks. A quick introduction. So my name is Kim Wittenberg. I'm with the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, and I started the seminar series back in 2017. So the goals of the seminar series are to facilitate connection between federal employees and with federal communities of practice, to facilitate sharing federal leader expertise, lessons learned, and successful strategies, offer professional development opportunities, and provide areas for problem solving, access to seminar resources, and also partnership and promotion of similar events. The vision of the seminar series is to build, retain, and connect a more collaborative, engaged, and capable workforce with the tools and expertise needed to more efficiently and effectively serve the public and ultimately go further, faster together. So the number of registrants so far for all of the seminars that we've had are over 20,000 attendees per seminar. Tends to be around 350 to 1,500 with representing agencies across the government, at least 40 to 60 agencies. And we've got all levels of GS, including SES. Our listserv subscribers number almost 6,000 now. And we've got 27 videos stored on max.gov, which will be migrating over to connect.gov, and then 21 videos on the YouTube channel with over 17,000 views so far on the YouTube channel. So do check out that YouTube channel afterwards to look at previous seminars that we've done. So we have 45 agencies attending today's seminar, and this is the list of those agencies. Welcome to everyone, and I'm happy to see you all here today. So this question here is not actually set up as a poll, but actually we're going to use the chat function. So from which region are you all working today? Northeast, South, Midwest, West, US territories, or internationally? Fantastic. So we've got a big range. A lot of folks in the Northeast, but we've got a lot of folks in the West, Midwest. We've got all the territories, Southwest. Anyone international? We've got Gulf Coast. We've got Northeast, South. Wonderful. So Puerto Rico, DC area. Fantastic. So welcome to everyone. And I'm so glad to see everyone in this virtual environment being able to connect from across the geographic range. If you'd like more information about the seminar series, please see the links here, and you don't need to write them down because you've all received the slides and also in the email as well, but just links to looking at the past seminars, joining the listserv, and contacting me with any questions. Okay, so ground rules for today, and you're doing fabulously so far. Engage, engage, engage. Use the chat function to comment, ask questions. This is a safe and productive environment, a positive focus on learning and actionable strategies, being respectful of fellow feds and agencies. And as you're already being patient with any IT hiccups, thanks so much. So again, today's seminar is Transforming Manager to Leader, the difference between management and leadership. And our agenda for today is we're going to start off with an icebreaker and then go over the learning objectives. Then we have 3 topics. What is the difference between a manager and a leader? What are the expectations of leadership? How to navigate as a new leader? And then we're going to have an opportunity for questions and answers. So I am very happy to be able to introduce today's speaker. So Robert Huttenlocker, he has been our esteemed speaker multiple times now for the seminar series, and he is just about to have his retirement at the end of this month. So just fabulous if he could join us today. Thank you so much. So he currently serves as a Chief Operating Officer for the Marketing and Regulatory Programs Mission Area at USDA. His USDA career spans almost 33 years, and his federal career almost 35 years. He holds a Bachelor of Science in Finance and a Master's of Business Administration, both from George Mason University. So welcome, and sorry if that just advanced too much, but welcome, Rob. And I'm going to turn it over to you now, and I'll advance your slides.
Thanks, Kim, and thanks to everyone for joining us today. Super excited to be back. This is the third one of these seminars that I have done over the years. And as Kim probably mentioned later, the other two are on YouTube with the others that she mentioned a little while ago. One thing I would start by saying here is that when I do these presentations, whatever we get into, especially in question and answers or any of the examples I use, I never make anything up. If I say it, I at least believe it to be true. Sometimes you may you may not believe that, but everything that I will offer is based on what has actually occurred as I've seen it. So that's important for you to know. This presentation I actually have done once before. In June, I did it for a Department of Transportation leadership event. I think on that particular day, it was a breakout session. We had about 80 people, and it seemed to be very well received. I think there's some very good information in here. I think like a lot of these things, you're going to talk for 60 to 90 minutes, whatever. I think at the end of the day, my hope is that you'll walk away with a few things that you will remember for a very long time. And, you know, maybe variable depending on who you are, but hopefully you'll walk away with something that sticks with you over the course of time. And as Kim mentioned, we're going to do an icebreaker. So Kim, could you go ahead and advance? So the workshop is about leadership, you know, and really getting from manager to leader and what that actually involves and how you do it. But let's start with a fundamental question. When you think about great leaders, and you can be in any walk of life, it can be in work, it can be in entertainment, sports, whatever. What do you think of, or who do you think of, and what makes a person a great leader? And just enter your information in the chat. You know, who stands out to you as a great leader, someone you admire as a leader, and really why?
We've got Steve Jobs. And then we've got some traits of leaders as well: humility, compassion. Got Martin Luther King.
Mother Teresa's in there. That'll be interesting when we get to the next slide. I saw Colin Powell a couple times. I saw Martin Luther King, communicators. Supporter, lead by example. Well, that's a big one. Nelson Mandela, also interesting when we get to the next slide. Humility showing up quite a bit. I think that's good. Integrity and empathy, very good. Gandhi. My friend Steve Bennett, RJH, that's me. He's a homer. Don't worry about that. Okay, Kim, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, so when I put this together, and by the way, I avoided contemporary politicians for obvious reasons. That obviously you could have some of those in here, but I didn't want to do that. But these are just some of the people that I thought of for various reasons. And they're not all great leaders for the same reason. They're great leaders for a myriad of reasons, but together, when you look at the entirety of what they represent, I mean, what we have here is Bill Gates, you know, an incredible innovator and philanthropist. Ellen DeGeneres, you know, entertainment icon. Mother Teresa, who many of you mentioned, you know, one of the world's great people. Nelson Mandela, also in that. Oprah Winfrey, a huge, you know, icon in entertainment and personality. Stephen King, Margaret Thatcher, Michael Jordan, Sonia Sotomayor, and Prime Minister Modi. Just incredible variability among these. I'm sorry, Stephen Hawking, not Stephen Hawking, one gentleman. All just incredible for either brilliance or charisma, likability, humanitarianism, whatever. All of these, and these are just some that came to mind. You know, and it's interesting. I was like, I do a lot of sports when I do these presentations, and Michael Jordan's a fascinating individual, one of the great athletes of all time, considered, you know, by many to be the GOAT in basketball. I forgot how good he was truly until I watched the Last Dance series in the recent past. But the thing about Michael Jordan, he's considered a great leader and he was a great winner. He was not a terribly nice person when he was doing what he was doing. Whereas most of these people are very nice people. And so, but that's just an example. Jordan was big because he just was so clutch. He had an undeniable spirit about him and a competitiveness that really set him apart. But we could go around these, but these are just some of the people. Kim? So I was actually, this is some 25 plus years ago, I was working on a piece for my then boss on leadership. And so I was just 14 at the time. It was relatively early in my supervisory leadership career, and relatively early in my career at all. But when I was doing that, some of the very people I just showed you came to mind. And what I ultimately came to believe, and this is just my belief at this time, is that ultimately these great leaders become great leaders to people for no other reason than who they are. There is something about the leader that attracts people to them. And like I've already said, there's a great deal that goes into defining these leaders, and what makes them great can be very variable, highly variable. We just said that. But this is what I think. So they become great leaders for no other reason than who they are. People will follow them, period. Kim? Oh, I see a question there. For those of us that share what clutch means. Clutch means, that's really the ability to deliver under pressure and when it's necessary. And this applies to far more endeavors than sports. Throughout my career, I've been blessed in a lot of ways. I've had really impeccable timing, incredible staff, and somehow an innate ability to deliver when it's necessary, one way or the other. And that's really what we're talking about. When we're talking about the person that goes to the free throw line, when the game is tied and makes the shot versus the one who bricks the shot. Okay. So for the learning objectives today, we're going to talk about the difference between management and leadership. We're going to talk about how to navigate the transition, and we're going to talk about the implications of a new leadership role. Okay.
Rob, there's a couple comments in the chat as well.
Yeah, I see that. There's a quote I have been hanging up, and what I've strived to be when I was supervisor. Real power is getting people committed. Real power comes from giving it up to others who are in better positions to do things than you are. Control is an illusion. The only control you can possess has come when people are controlling themselves. Well, I would word that a little bit differently, but yes, the role of the leader is not to try to control everything. The role of the leader is not to be the smartest person in the room. The role of the leader is to be able to get the right people together, galvanize them, put them in positions to be successful, and really stay out of the way. And, I've over the course of all these years that I've been doing it, I have become very good at staying out of the way of people who know what they're doing more than I do. And the job I have, 700 people and 14,000 customers. We have oodles and oodles of different functions that we do across the spectrum of business services. I'm only the foremost expert in one or two of probably hundreds of services that we have. And the other one is there's a lot about leader behaviors that are learnable and that everyone can lead. The lead from where you are model. Well, I think it's true if you observe the kinds of things that attract you to leaders, and then you work to emulate those in your own style over the course of time, so they're learned behaviors and instinctive reactions. I think that's very true. There are aspects of leadership that do set some apart. We used to talk a lot about emotional intelligence. Now we talk a lot about likability, charisma, Obviously, there's authenticity, trust. We'll get into some of this as we go. Okay. Topic number one is, what is the difference between a manager and a leader, Kim? So again, a sports metaphor. But what I've done here is I've got two NFL quarterbacks. Trent Dilfer, who played for the Baltimore Ravens and won a Super Bowl, and Tom Brady, who's generally considered the greatest quarterback of all time. And, you know, this isn't a perfect example or way to go about depicting managers and leaders, but I think it's instructive, and I really like it. So Kim, go to the next slide. So when we talk about management versus leadership, you know, and looking at these, you know, these just basic definitions. Management, the act or manner of managing, handling, direction, or control. Skill in managing, executive ability, great management, and tact. We get a little bit better definitions as we go here, but leadership, the position or function of a leader, a person who guides or directs a group. He managed to maintain his leadership of the party despite heavy opposition. We've seen that in politics recently. An ability to lead. As early as 6th grade, she displayed remarkable leadership potential. That means, you know, even in grade school, and maybe especially in school, you'll have all these kids together. And some are simply more popular. Some essentially become the leaders of the pack. Some become the barn bosses. Those are different things. They kind of mean the same thing. It's just the way it happens. And there's a reason. You know, you watch a show like Survivor, which has been on for years and years now. This becomes a factor. Sometimes it works for them. Sometimes it works against them. Depends on how big a threat they are. Kim? So these I like a little bit better. Management is getting the confused, misguided, unmotivated, and misdirected to accomplish a common purpose on a regular recurring basis. The ultimate intersection between leadership and management is an appreciation for what motivates and causes individuals to behave the way they do. The ability to draw out the best of them with a purpose in mind. So managers tend to be, you know, when we talk about it, managers tend to be lower level, like first or maybe second level supervisors, as opposed to high level executives or whatever. And they do tend to be doing, you know, more routine things. So you might be, you know, overseeing a team that makes widgets. Well, that's one thing. It's a little bit different to be overseeing a team that's developing new technologies, innovating, and working on, you know, new vision and direction. Leadership is the creation of a positive, non-incremental change, including the creation of a vision to guide that change, a strategy, the empowerment of people to make the vision happen despite obstacles, and the creation of a coalition of energy and momentum that can move that change forward. So, you know, to be very elementary with this, you know, you might get a manager in a small operation that, again, is making widgets. And what that person cares about is that that team is all there on time and that each person is doing what they are to keep the line moving. And so in some case, you might say, well, the manager has the team under the thumb. But as you move to the leadership realm, it's completely different. You know, you're working on more complex things, usually speaking, maybe longer term things. You're bringing in folks that have a high level of skill and expertise in many ways. And really the key is, you know, you want to get the best people you can. You want to empower them, as was said. You want to resource them to be successful. And then you want to let them do what they do.
Rob, there was a question about just if you could define non-incremental change. What do you mean by that?
Well, incremental means a little bit at a time. So, you know, you may move. Incremental change may be the assembly line goes from 2 widgets a minute to 4 to 6 to 8. I think when you look at non-incremental, you're looking at, you know, it's just variable. And it could occur in a much more significant way if everything aligns. Okay, Kim? So then we look at some of these. Yeah, I think that's right. Okay, so it's just some of the differences here that we deal with. Process versus vision. Of course, I just talked about this. Effective leaders are centered on a vision to guide change, whereas managers set out to achieve organizational goals through processes such as budgeting, organizational structure, and staffing. Leaders are more intent on thinking ahead and capitalizing on opportunities. It's just different. There's importance in both. And it's probably true that, leaders are going to be managers too. Every manager is not necessarily a leader. Organizing versus aligning. The manager administers, the leader innovates. The manager maintains, the leader develops. The manager focuses on systems and structure. The leader focuses on people. Because remember what I said, why do you follow the leader? There's something about it. There's a connection that's there. Okay, that connection may not always be in lower level management and so forth like that and work. But in high level, to be successful, the leader has to get the people to follow, okay, and has to relate to the people. Position versus quality. Manager is a title. It's a role and a set of responsibilities. Having the position of manager does not make you a leader. The best managers are leaders, but the two are not synonymous. Leadership is the result of action. If you act in a way that inspires, encourages, and engages others, you are a leader. It doesn't matter your title or position. Kim?
Rob, there's a question in the chat.
Okay. How do leaders develop their visioning ability when they aren't the smartest in the room? How do you reconcile not having full functional knowledge and still being able to have a vision? Well, I think in this case, you don't necessarily have to be the smartest to have ideas about how to move things forward. But you can also, if you've empowered the people around you, they'll help you. They'll bring things to your attention. They'll bring ideas forward. You also have your customers, your superiors, and others that are identifying needed changes, right? So like here at APHIS, for the longest time, we could not move the onboard staffing number forward. We would be hiring and hiring, attriting and attriting, and spinning in a very narrow band. And then because we had an HR director at the time who innovated a lot of stuff based on, urgency and direction she was getting from me and the administrator, customers, and did things we had never done before. Started using mega announcements where we announce a bunch of positions in a single announcement as opposed to each one as a one-off. She split our operations component and made one part of that just dedicated to the recruitment. Well, we could not get above 5,800 on board forever, it seemed. And as of the last report, and we've had steady progress over the last year, we were at 5,960. Now that may not sound like a lot, but those 160 positions to the managers of those positions is critical. And so I think you have to be open and receptive to the information that you're getting, and you have to work through it. But you also have to trust the ones around you. You don't do it in a vacuum. He didn't say you weren't smart. In fact, good leaders are smartly. Well, right. Look, there's different kinds of intelligence, right? There are some people that are genius level IQs. There are some of those people that have zero common sense. There are some of those people that have, really zero ability to lead other people. There are some people that are of much more moderate intelligence, but they work well with people. They can get people to do what they need them to do. That's really me. You know, when I look at the SDS cadre around me, you know, I don't know, but if you actually looked at the IQ of the group, we have, you know, 40-ish executives in APHIS. You know, I don't know, I'd probably be in the middle of that. But when it comes to working well with other people, that's kind of what has set me apart. You know, that and the resourcefulness that we talked about before. You don't have very many individuals that we would deem, you know, not terribly intelligent that are effective leaders, but you definitely have some very brilliant people that either they don't work well with others, or there's some other issue that kind of holds them back in this way. So looking at, again, managers and leaders, the manager is a person who has control or direction of an institution, business, you know, part of a division, phrase of it, whatever. A person who manages, the manager of our track team. He's, you know, that person's going to make sure everyone's there, everyone's on the bus, the supplies are on, etc. Is that person really going to inspire the runners to run faster or the jumpers to jump higher or farther? Possibly not. A person who controls and manipulates resources and expenditures as of a household. Okay, like you manage the household budget. That means basically what that means is you make sure that you have more money coming in than going out, that bills are paid on time. Okay, but not necessarily you come up with this incredible new way to increase the family finances. The leader is a person or thing that leads, a guiding or directing head as of an army, movement, or political group. You know, military leaders are really an impressive thing, because you look at what's, you know, there's a comparability or equivalency, for example, between like a general and an admiral or a senior executive. And, you know, every positions vary so much, it's hard to say. But when you look at some of the enormous responsibility that military leaders have, like the person responsible for an aircraft carrier out at sea with all the people on the boat and billions of dollars. I mean, there aren't many non-military executives that have that kind of responsibility. I mean, you know, thousands of crewmen, billions of dollars in machinery that they're responsible for. That's why you look at in the military, you know, colonels, which are GS-15 equivalent. Some colonels have vast responsibility. They truly do. And, you know, you look at some of the great military people that we've had over the years, and Colin Powell came up before, truly impressive, Schwarzkopf, others. So there we go. Kim? Okay, I want to stop here because I see this chat feature is so good in these hybrids. I didn't have this when I did the presentation with DOT. It really adds to the thing here. True leaders are trusted. A leader maintains trust by demonstrating ability, integrity, and benevolence. If one doesn't play nicely with others, I would think that undermines trust and makes leading very difficult, but out of the command and control style. Erin there, she could be teaching this class. That is a completely true statement. I couldn't agree with her more. A couple other ones. George Patton, I had a friend who was a driver for General Bradley, and he told me that the men disliked George Patton, would follow him anywhere because he was a true leader. See, that was true of Jordan. I mean, Michael Jordan was not a nice person, generally speaking, to most anyone during his glory days. But those people would have, you know, died beside him to try to win championships. Okay, so let's get back to this for a second. The management versus leadership using my Trent Dilfer and Tom Brady example. So Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl with the Ray Lewis, Ed Reed Ravens, one of the great defenses in NFL history. Trent Dilfer is he was an average quarterback at best, one of the least good quarterbacks to win the Super Bowl, but he's not alone. But that's not saying he still was an NFL quarterback, and he did what they asked him to do. Okay, they asked him to execute the offensive game plan. run the plays that are called. Avoid mistakes and turnovers. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. Rely on that great defense. Don't be the reason your team loses the game. Win a ring despite being far removed from the Hall of Fame. Trent Dilfer would need the same ticket I would to get into the Hall of Fame. He's still a Super Bowl champion. He still has things that will never be taken away from him because he within his ability did what was asked to do. Okay, we have lots of these types of people in professional sports nowadays. Nothing to criticize him for, but not nearly what we're going to get to with Tom Brady. Okay, and now Tom Brady, even since I did this presentation in June, we've now seen the complete collapse of the New England Patriots. So now everybody is kind of coming to the conclusion that Tom Brady was truly the genius behind that dynasty, not Belichick, the coach. But what Brady could do was command a complex offense and audible when necessary. So he was kind of the architect of the play calling, and he could do whatever he needed to do based on what he saw and assessed. He demonstrated a passion to win always. This picture captures that. I mean, you see countless pictures of him like this. He had that Michael Jordan-like will to win, thrived under pressure. We talked about that earlier. Clutch, same thing. Thrive under pressure. Deliver when it's necessary. Now, did he always? No. When they played the Eagles a few years ago, they had a chance. He got sacked and fumbled, and that ended the game. And they lost to the Nick Foles Eagles. Nick Foles falls in the Trent Dilfer category. But Tom Brady has 7 Super Bowl wins. No one's close to that. He inspired the team to excel. And with 7 rings and be considered the greatest of all time, he is one of the great leaders of men and people that we've seen in professional sports. Kim?
I just wanted to mention there was a comment about how someone in the chat thought that most feds were asked more to be like the game manager rather than like Tom Brady.
Well, I think that's interesting. The federal environment is different than professional sports or some of these other even private business. Things do tend to move slowly in the government. The hierarchy is critical in the government and so forth. So, when even though I might have tried it unsuccessfully early in my career, when you come in at the beginning, at the bottom, and you think you know everything, and you're just it's not gonna work well. So what needs to happen is you need to evolve and improve and develop as you move up the hierarchy. And the statement is correct, right? Because the senior executives, there's only like 7,000 in the entire federal government. I think it's like 0.5% of feds. And then of course you have your non-career political leadership as well that enters in. And those are the ones, those 2 groups that really do a lot of what we're talking about here at the highest level. But there's also the whole issue, and I think one of the attendees mentioned this earlier, there's leaders at all levels, okay, like in the 6th grade. So, some of these things, it may sound duplicitous, it's really not. It's just kind of how human nature works in this space. So I would agree with the person that probably most of the feds are managers because, by the time you're getting to the 15 and the SES levels, you're at a much smaller percentage of the workforce. In USDA, which is about 100,000 people, there are 300 senior executives. So, let that sink in, right? I mean, APHIS as an agency has more employees when you count all, terms and temps and so forth, than all the senior executives in the federal government. And APHIS is really a medium-sized agency. So we'll kind of develop some other examples of how to do that going. Let's talk about the different roles of leaders. Okay, the visionary, that's come up a bunch of times. Do you sort of have an idea of what the future looks like and where you're trying to get? The strategist, well, how are you going to do that? You know, strategic planning, coming up with goals and objectives, these kinds of things. Establish effective communication protocols. Communication has been discussed throughout this and in the chat extensively. Communication is a key thing. And that gets to the whole collaboration piece, playing well with others, which was also in the chat. Be an effective role model. This has been discussed in the chat. You know, you can't expect people to do more than you do. If you operate unethically, what would you expect others to? That's okay, because it's not okay, but you have to set the standard. The talent advocate, again, go out and get the best people, improve the people you have, make them all they can be. And, you know, eventually as the leader, part of your job is to help these high performers continue to evolve and develop in other, perhaps in other organizations, because, you know, I've been blessed, great staff. The current staff I have, the best one I've ever had. And in the time I've been back, of the 11 people in the core group, management team and directors in my shop, we've had only one change in 3 years, only one. That's very fortunate. It's probably that, you know, obviously it's a great organization, people are happy here, etc. But there are times, you know, and throughout the organization where we've had other people that are really good, but they want to be executives. There's no slot for them, so they end up going somewhere else. Well, if that happens, that's good for us too, because someone's going to say, well, you know, Mary Beth was in that job and now she's doing this, so maybe that's a job I want to take, and it becomes a self-feeding thing to continue. And there is a reputational value to leadership in the hiring and recruitment and retention space. Believe me on that. You know, inspiration and motivation. I think, you know, when you looked at that picture earlier with all those great people, I think in one way or another, they all did this, either because they were just revolutionary in change that they brought, incredible in humanitarianism, you know, winning innovators, you know, whatever, the smartest people, you know, Stephen Hawking, what a genius, you know, there. And then setting an example, that gets back to the role modeling piece. I'm looking at the chat here.
Question in the chat. Can you also speak to the role of leaders and accountability for their own decisions and the decisions they support within their teams?
Yeah, well, yeah, this is a good one for me. You know, throughout my career, I've made any number of mistakes. I mean, constant, you know, over the course of time, decisions that ultimately didn't work out. You know, you do the best you can at the time. The idea is a decision is needed. You have information, for example, you work to make the best decision you can. And then 5 minutes later, you learn something that changes it. Okay. Well, most of what we do as feds, is not life or death. There are exceptions where a bad decision could lead to the loss of life. Certainly decisions could lead to property issues and things like that, but very few of us in the grand scheme are in a life or death situation. Okay. If we screw up in my shop, someone doesn't get paid, they don't get onboarded on time, the retirement is slow, whatever. You know, the IT doesn't work on that given day, whatever, but you can make amends. And okay, so when it comes as a leader of people, when you make a mistake, you have to own it. You can't be looking to pin it on somebody else. You can't be looking to deny it. You have to own it. Because if you do those other things, and everybody knows a leader that's all hunky-dory when things are good, and then the minute something goes wrong, that person's running around trying to find someone to pin it on. That's a bad look. And That's not going to get people to follow you. It's not going to be a reputational value of leadership that you're looking for. Okay, so first thing is own it. The second thing is, to the extent you can, fix it. Whatever happened, and who's ever responsible, first endeavor to fix it. And then, assess the situation, not really from a point of blame, but from a point of learning for the future. Really, the leader is supposed to give all the credit for things that go well to the staff and carry the burden of the things that go wrong and protect the staff. That's the right way to do it. And the wrong way to do it is in reverse. And there are some, unfortunately, that do that. Kim?
And Rob, I just wanted to note there's one question that just popped up in the chat.
Is there a situation where an effective manager can have superior leaders in their chain of command with everyone understanding roles? This is a gifted group we've got today, Kim. Lots of good questions, lots of good thoughts. The answer is yes. And ideally, that's what you want. Okay, you want the best people in your midst possible, and you want to turn them loose, the best you can. Now, obviously, ultimately, the organization has goals and objectives and, interests and things like that. So everyone needs to be playing within that set of rules. But yes, you want that. Now, this is what I want to say on this one. I'll use this question to make this point. What can be interesting in this space is, say that you have a deputy administrator and an associate deputy administrator. So the one and the two, like I'm the one and I have a very, very good number two. Well, what can happen? There's two things that come into this kind of leadership and sort of power thing. There is the power of the position. Okay, so by definition, the one is higher than the two. So if it comes down to a difference of opinion, the one is going to prevail. Okay, but then there's a piece that there's the power of the personality. And to this person's question, it isn't always the case that the one has the power of the personality. Okay, and I've been in that situation. I've been both a one and a two over the years. And one time I worked with a very, very intelligent individual. She was the one. But it is true that I had the more dynamic, outgoing personality, that I could overrun her in a meeting if I didn't manage the relationship correctly. So ideally, if you're the one and you have the power of the position and the power of the personality, you're not going to run into this issue. But many times, especially as you look at larger organizations, it's not going to be that way, because you're going to have maybe some very, very good, high-performing 15s with strong personalities, whatever you might have. The key is, though, when you're in the situation I was in there, is that you have to respect the power of the position of the one, and you have to defer. You be deferential. Because if you don't do that, what you're going to do is you're going to compromise the compatibility the two of you have, the trust the one has in you, and it's going to be a problem. So it's incumbent on the two in that situation, or the subordinate leader, to recognize who the boss is. And you may not like that. You may not think that person should be the boss, but too bad. That's the decision that was made, and that's where you have to operate. Now, if you can't, then you may want to look at your options in terms of going somewhere where you'd be a little bit more comfortable, but that's the answer to that question.
And Rob, I advanced the slides as well.
Yeah, well, yeah, she did. There's one question here. Person says, I think it's also incumbent on the one to call the two to the carpet when they step over the line. I appreciate the sentiment there. I don't like the terminology. That I've been a leader for almost 3 decades, a supervisor manager leader for almost 3 decades. Look, I've had very direct conversations with people, explained a concern, made it clear that if it happened again, we were going to have a problem. But I've never been ugly to a person. I've never yelled at a person that I can recall in all these years of supervision. So calling on the carpet, that sounds a little bit draconian to me. I think what you want to do is have a developmental moment, a teaching moment with that person. But okay, different roles of leaders. Coach, I just said that. Can we advance the slide too soon, or I'd have looked really smart? But in this case, coach, your whole idea is to coach them up, to help them be better than they are. Facilitate, that's what we do. A lot of it. A lot of what we do is getting the right connections together. In this job, I'm the mission area COO, but I sit on the USDA COO council. So, and sometimes we work on enterprise issues or problems. And part of the issue is getting the right people together to do it. A change agent, being a change agent is, you can come in and fix a problem or move an organization forward. I have, over the course of time, many times been called in. Either I've gone into an organization from the outside, which generally indicates that there's some work needed there to improve things, or I've been asked to fix a specific situation. And being labeled a fixer is, in my experience, never bad. You are someone that can go in and do what needs to be done. Totally different than being labeled highly ambitious. Highly ambitious is never good in my experience. That means you would run over your grandmother to get a promotion. That's what that means. Okay. An influencer, decision maker, obviously we talked about that. An influencer, you can persuade, guide people to action or decision. A team player, that's always important, right? If it's perceived that it's all about you, then that's going to go to those issues we talked about that are going to erode trust and so forth. It's really, you want to be one of the group. You may be the senior one, but it doesn't make you somehow better than everyone else. Delegation is critical. You get to a job like this, and I was in this job once before. I took a different job to try something different for a few years, and then I came back. The first time I was in this job, I did not delegate nearly effectively enough, and I was sort of overwhelmed and spinning. Okay, you have to know what you can actually touch and handle. And so you have to accept that some things you can't. You have to accept that some things may not be done exactly as you would have them done, but is it really going to matter? Letting the perfect get in the way of the good and these kinds of things. And be a listener. Are you hearing what your customers are telling you, what your superiors are telling you, very importantly, what your staff is telling you? Are you hearing? We're overwhelmed. We don't know what we're supposed to do. If they're saying that, you need to respond to that. You need to help them through. What makes a person a good influencer? How would this skill be developed? Is it network driven? Well, it's interesting on the influencer thing. You see all kinds of people doing this in social media now, right? For some reason, people gravitate to those individuals and they believe what they say. Okay, so part of it is that you have a competency and that you play well with other people and that you kind of show them the way. It's kind of like bringing the horse to water. So that's what I would say about that. The thing about these leadership traits, again, in the federal system, people start off as, I don't know, GS4s, 5s, 7s, and they as over the course of a career, they'll go 7, 9, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, whatever. And the idea is that you grow and develop at each level. They don't put a GS-13 in an SES slot because it would almost certainly be a disaster. You wouldn't have the networking skills, the relationship skills, the resilience to be successful. But as you go up and as you learn by trial and error and by working to improve areas where you're not as strong and working to strengthen areas you are strong, you're going to get better, more confident, and these things will come. The big thing with leadership is it should be instinctive. Okay, I do not go home and think about how could I be a better leader tomorrow. That's not something that I do, because after all these years, I mean, I may say I made a mistake today, I need to make that right, or whatever, but it's not about overanalyzing how to be a leader. If you're doing that, you're doing it wrong. Okay, Kim? Okay, what are the expectations of leadership? All right, go ahead. Typically, as we move from manager to leader, we're going to gain in rank or grade level. So you may go from like a GS-14 front level line supervisor to a 15 mid-level to SES senior. And then even in the SES, there's levels, right? In APHIS here, we have at least 4, it's probably more than that in some of the large organizations, but me and my deputy, and then we have 3 SES directors under there, and then there's an associate administrator or 2 and an administrator above it. So all those are SES levels, but they're hierarchically different, but you're moving along that. You inherit a larger organization and higher ranking or graded subordinates. I just kind of covered that, right? In this job, my immediate staff, well, my deputies and my immediate staff is, I think 3 SES, 4 GS-15s, a 14, a 13, and a 12, I think is the immediate, right? Where when I was a first level SES, it started at the 15 level and 14 level and down. So it's just different. Become responsible for issues of greater scope and complexity. And the biggest issue is managers are really kind of focused on getting the people to do things, and leaders are really focused on bigger issues. And at that point, you expect kind of some of this people stuff to be working like it should. The learning curve is steeper as leaders are expected to come up to speed more quickly and to begin having impact sooner. Manage expectations effectively. Now, okay, hear this. You go in as a first level supervisor, you're not going to know everything the first day. You got to work through that. And there's a period of time. As an executive, there's still a period of time, but there is an expectation that you're going to hit the ground running and have impact sooner. That said, you can't be in a hurry to have an impact. You can't be a bull in a china shop when you come in. You got to be a little bit deliberate about this, but it is going to be at every level up an expectation that you're that much more experienced, you're that much more capable. Leaders are under greater scrutiny from the workforce. Everyone watches everything you do and listens to everything you say. Be a model example always. We've covered this today already. But the one thing you have to be careful about, okay, in a job like this, I have sometimes inadvertently created a flurry of activity that I didn't mean to create. Like I may see some iPad that someone has, say for an example, and say, gee, I'd like to have one of those iPads, but I didn't ask for the iPad. I said it'd be nice to have one of those iPads, but now I got a whole bunch of people running around saying, Rob wants an iPad, make it happen. Okay, so that's a very simple example of the kind of thing, but you have to be careful because people will run on what you say and they'll be watching you. And there's a reason that FEVS asks questions like, you know, my leaders instill trust and confidence in me, or I admire my leaders. That's why they're asking those things. And as I said at the beginning of this slide, generally speaking, leaders spend less time managing subordinates and processes and more time working with peers and superiors on complicated challenges or problems. Relationship building and management is critical. The number one key to executive success is the ability to work well with other people. Resilience is number two.
Rob, I just wanted to mention just a quick time check that we have about 25 minutes left. And I also wanted to note some folks were noting how leaders can be at all GS levels. And I just wanted to just pause. I was just writing in the chat that you were talking more about former leadership roles, but leaders can be at all levels. I think there were some comments around that.
Yeah, well, that's 100% true. There's a whole philosophy of leading at all levels. Leaders in elementary school, leaders in high school, leaders on sports teams, leaders in the entertainment industry, leaders in retail stores, wherever. Yes, it's the person that has the ability to motivate and inspire people, for people to listen and follow. Okay, so you see this all the time on these game shows and stuff. You'll put a group of people that don't know each other there, and over the course of time, someone emerges as the leader. And sometimes it happens very, very quickly. It may be because that person's willing to go out on a limb and say stuff. It may be that when they talk, they make sense, and people say, yeah, that makes sense. Or they say that person has courage, whatever it is. But yes, there's leaders at all levels. Okay, that's true. When we talk about some of these high level concepts, they become increasingly important and applicable the higher the position is. Kim?
I just wanted to also note there was one comment about safety and kind of admitting to mistakes or conversation around mistakes, and they asked the question about whether or not this is easier or more difficult now. I think there's some comments in the chat about it kind of depends on which organization you're in and which team you're in, and the organizational culture and psychological safety around learning from mistakes.
Well, there's a whole thing there. I mean, there's so much we could talk about there. What I would say is that the organizational culture and climate is a major part of job satisfaction. It's also a major part of how you're going to develop. Okay, I was very fortunate. I was high performing, but when I made mistakes, people above me were willing to talk to me about them, work to improve, improve me in the future, make sure I learned from it, make sure I knew better, and shield me. I didn't get thrown under the bus on several occasions when I could have. And so I think that is what I would say. I think you have to evaluate that in terms of your job choices and where you go, and doing your due diligence and looking at FEBS results about organizations, because they tell a lot. The Partnership for Public Service Best Rankings tell a lot. So, if you're an organization where you are scared to voice a safety concern, that may not be the best organization to be in. Kim?
And one more question, and then I'll move the slides. There is one question about, for a new manager, do you feel it is best to learn how to manage and focus on business results first, and then once learned, develop leadership skills, or should a new manager focus on both being a manager and a leader at the same time? And then I'll move the slide.
Well, what I think is my own personal experience, what a new manager should do is recognize they're now a manager and they're now responsible for these other people. And those other people should be your greatest priority. And learning and mastering the job you're in. Those two things. If you focus on the people, taking care of them, building the relationships that you need both inside and outside the organization, and mastering the job, while being a low maintenance asset, someone who doesn't bang the drum and draw all this kind of attention or, have all kinds of issues, you're going to be successful. You just are. But it's really important to recognize that your success is going to be the result of your people's success. So if you think, well, I'm this great thing, but all my people are not very good, Well, something's wrong with that, okay? Because you're not all that and your people aren't any good. It's probably more likely your people are making you look good. Okay. So let's talk about some of these other factors here. Delegation. The importance of effective delegating increases as you move up from manager to leader and then further up the chain. The reason is because the responsibility becomes larger, the magnitude of the issues becomes larger, and you cannot be inundated in minutia. Whatever. You have to be willing to say, look, I'm going to let whomever handle this, and I will deal with what, you know, the most pressing issue is, or however that plays out. But you have to pick and choose where you're going to devote your time and where you're going to let others have that autonomy to do it. Communication, effective communication, both written and oral, are critical. So success. Typically, written is kind of critical in your earlier years, and as you're moving up the chain. That was true for me. But you know, by the time I was 14, I was still a nervous wreck public speaking, honestly. And it was over the years in the 14, 15, and SES levels that I become much more comfortable in it. So written, but still written is very important now. How I say things, you know, reviewing documents, writing documents, whatever, both are critical. Written typically is a huge part of the early years, oral, a huge part of the late years. Conflict resolution, an extremely important skill because conflict impacts relationship management and collaboration, and because the stakes increase as you move up the chain. Look, if me and one of my colleagues just, you know, are at odds and not able to work together, things are not going to get done. It's really just not acceptable. We as executives and professionals have to, you know, meet others halfway, find a compromise, and move forward. And training, it's important to continue your development as you move up the leadership chain, but it's equally important for you to invest in and contribute to the development of your team, possibly more. I mean, you are responsible for the development of your team. The better they are, the better everyone is. There's a lot here on the side. I'm just going to pick this one. As you speak about your leadership skills and where you are today, can you honestly say that it's 100% your leadership skills and not based on the color of your skin and gender? Well, you know, I would say yes. You know, when you look at when I was actually coming up in the years that I was coming up the chain, in some cases, you know, white males felt they were almost being, you know, discriminated against in the favor of others, sexes and genders and so forth, in order to really get a more diverse workforce. Now, that was an issue. Some may disagree with that. I believe that I have gotten where I've got on merit. I look at the APHIS executive workforce. When I came in 2006 as a first-time SES, we had at least 2 men for every woman on the team. Just look at that one attribute of the executive team. And today, there are more women than men on the executive team. And what I would say to that is, you know, I believe that, at least in my experience here, people are being hired and promoted based on merit. Now, to your point, you know, there are organizations where that may not always be the case. And that goes to what I said earlier about, you know, doing your due diligence, making sure that you're set up for success. You know, there's no place for discrimination in the workforce in any regard. And in hiring and promotion and all, in as much as any other area, you know, people should be promoted based on their merit and what they have proven they're able to do. So we're talking about vision and setting the strategy versus implementing it. So as discussed earlier, the leader is typically the visionary and the strategist. As such, leader generally sets the strategy and then ensures that the appropriate resources are in place to implement. You know, they'll come up with this great idea, and then they'll go and they'll say, team, implement, they go on to think of the next one. You know, you can think of people in, you know, in the private sector, you know, innovators and visionaries and some of these billionaires, Bezos and Musk, and whether you agree with them or like them or whatever, they have been visionaries that really changed the way the marketplace works, the way technology it works, and what we have available to us. Subordinate managers generally implement the strategy. That's, I mean, you have an administrator, and then, you know, here that sets the overall vision for us. And then all of us, to some extent, we become kind of responsible for both ends of that. The leader oversees the implementation of the strategy and holds implementers accountable. Okay. So when it comes to implementing the strategy, here's some keys here. Set clear goals and define key variables. You can never get anywhere if you're not clear where you're trying to get. It goes to clarity of purpose, fundamental to any project success. What is it that we're trying to do? Determine roles, responsibilities, and relationships. You know, who is going to do what and be responsible. Delegate the work. Again, you have to. You can't do it all. Execute the plan, monitor progress and performance, and provide continued support. So you're overseeing things. Take corrective action, adjust as necessary. This is what I said earlier. Look, in this process, mistakes may have been made. You may have set it up. Then all of a sudden we realize, well, this isn't really working. Okay, stop. Look at what the information you have now, reset, proceed. Get closure on the project and agreement on the output. Okay. So at the end of the day, you know, are we where we intended to be, and are we in agreement? And then conduct a retrospective or review of how the process went. We call this hot washes a lot of times. Like, for example, you know, we had a COVID incident management team here in the Mission area that helped with whatever department needed us to implement, help keep the workforce informed, and so forth and so on. When we finally sunset that IMT in September, we've been working on an after action to look at all the things that went well and didn't go well and how we would do things different in the future. That's it. It's all about doing, evaluating, learning, adjusting, continuing. Kim, how to navigate as a new leader. Mentorship, so important. And this is another thing that applies at all levels, right? Everybody doesn't need an SES mentor, and only SES don't need to, you shouldn't be mentors. It should be at all levels. But I am ultimately the product of strong coaching and mentoring, and I am a strong, if not the strongest, supporter in coaching and mentoring. You know, I never would have got where I did if people didn't take an interest in me, get me on the right track, you know, correct when things were wrong, and so forth. And I cannot thank them enough. I have devoted as much of my time as an executive to giving back as possible. So my recommendations are to get one or more and to be one, both sides, because whatever position you're in, someone's trying to get to your level, just like you're trying to get to the next level. So, and you learn on both sides of that transaction. Chemistry and commitment are paramount. You can't just pair any two people together and hope for a perfect relationship. It's just like marriage. You need to have some level of compatibility, chemistry, something that draws you together. Meet routinely and as needed. You know, I have all kinds of these relationships. Sometimes I meet every month with folks. Sometimes I meet whenever they call and say, and it could be 6 months or a year, I haven't seen them, whatever they need. Use the time wisely and address real issues. The point of this is not just to rub elbows with higher level people and gossip or shoot the bull or whatever. The point is to come in and work on something. Work on your professional development. Work on an issue you're having. Work on a challenge you're having with your boss. Something like that, and actually to work on it. Share openly and listen actively. You have to be engaged and you have to trust for this to work. And use the information to drive your self-improvement. An iterative process. that over the course of time will ultimately it will then lead to those instincts that we talked about earlier. Kim? So leadership best practices. Take it slow and steady. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, when I got into the SES, it was 2006. It's been over 17 years. Okay, my hair was red when it started, almost the color of Kim's in her picture there. And now you see it. It's white. Okay, so it is a grind because days are not always a bed of roses, and you gotta rebound from that and so forth. But the key is don't just come in like you're on fire and try to change everything before you've assessed it and so forth. And view your career as a long-term effort, not a short-term thing to prove that you deserve the job you have. You'll remember this one. This is one of those things you hopefully will remember forever. If you allow yourself to be a hamster on a wheel, you will be one. And the lower picture, I really love that one. That's how I felt the first time I moved into this job, and I just had too much on my plate, didn't delegate effectively, and kind of wore out in a little bit of time. Remember again that everyone is watching everything you do. If you're at the top and you're always on camera, everything you do, if you slipping out of work early, everybody knows it. And they're like, well, it must be okay to slip out early. Okay. No. Make relationship management and collaboration a priority. I say number one. Again, what I said earlier, bestow the credit, shoulder the blame. Things go well, the staff wins. Things go wrong, you lose. That's it. Worry about the job you are in, not the next one or where you're trying to get. This was critical to me. Before I was a 14 supervisor, I was only worried about the next promotion, the next advancement. People didn't really like working with me that much. I didn't really value others like I needed to. I had an epiphany at that 14 level. There's reasons, that they came to me, but fundamentally I realized I had 30 years to go and I was going to sit somewhere for a long time. So at that point, I just focused on those two things I said, mastering the job and the people and building the relationships, and let everything just sort of evolve. Now, certainly I applied for jobs over time, but it wasn't a rush. I only applied for jobs that looked really good for me. And that's what I did. And don't overthink it. Rely on your instincts and enjoy the ride. That's what I said earlier. If you're going home thinking about how I'm leading, you're probably doing it wrong. Now you can think about maybe some of you did that didn't work out or had a negative impact or upset the apple cart, fine. But you shouldn't be questioning your leadership style, because by that point, it should be ingrained and instinctive. Kim? I like this. Now, this was actually about a year and a half ago now. It's incredible how time flies. But in 2022, I participated in a Partnership for Public Service Future of Work initiative. During the June session on leading change, we heard from David Kapos, who was the former director at the Patent and Trademark Office. And he laid out his keys for leading change. And you're going to see, themes here. People skills are the #1 focus when recruiting new CEOs. You have to work well with people. People have to follow you. It's just fundamental. Execution beats planning for breakfast. And he credited Richard Plepler, the former CEO of HBO. And what he really means is, look, you can plan all day. You can plan until the cows come home. But once it's time to go, can you get it done? And, we ultimately don't care when we're evaluating candidates. We don't care what you're responsible for so much as what we know, what you've proven you can do and that we can rely on. When anyone asks for something, give them what they ask for and a little bit more. Exceed the need. Go beyond the call. And everything in life needs to be in service to who you are serving or reporting to. Remember, it's not about you. It's about the customer, the employees that work for you, whoever. That's who you're serving. Kim? Okay, I've got one here. Let's see.
Actually, Rob, There are a few.
Yes.
There are a bunch of questions that have been coming in because we were short on time. I kind of just wanted you to get through your slides first. So I
Yeah.
do have some that are queued up. Do you want me to do that before
You
going through
run
these
it from here,
questions?
Kim. You tell me what you want me to answer for how long.
I think I just want to make one comment. There were some questions about mentorship, and one person asked, you know, if you're already happy with the job you're in, do you need mentorship? And it seems that, you know, mentorship and coaching can be used at, you know, even if you're in the job you're in already, it's at improving, because folks can always improve. And there were some questions about how do you find a mentor and a coach? And there were some great comments in the chat about how folks have found their mentors and coaches. And I just wanted to mention that Rob has been my mentor. I found him by an interaction in the PMC program, and then just asked, you know, would you be willing to mentor me? So it's really reaching out to folks, doing informational interviews. And I just want to mention, we actually did a session on developmental opportunities, and there was a whole presentation on mentoring and coaching. And those slides are in the link that was sent around in the old max.gov site, but it will merge over to the new connect.gov site. If you all can't find that, I'm happy to share it. It does have information on how to find mentors and coaches. There was another question about, have you found any generational differences in the understanding of leadership and management? I'll turn that over to you, Rob.
Well, I'll take that one, and then let's go back to the mentoring one. The expectations, in my experience, of the younger workforce are very different than they were like when I came in. You know, back when I came in 1989, we picked a path, and we kind of grinded out and did, and of course we didn't have nearly the workplace flexibilities that we do today, et cetera, but it was a grind. You know, you committed to a career, 30 years, whatever. And, you know, and you were kind of committed and devoted to that, you know. And, you know, some people may have changed, or they may have changed series, whatever, but you said, I'm going to be a Fed for 30 years. That's what I'm going to do. You have to be sensitive to the expectations of the younger workers, which are very different. And you have to recognize, you know, workplace flexibilities are critical to them. Time off is critical to them. Some of them don't really consider work a career. It's the job of the moment. So with that said, you're going to have to appeal to people with that mindset in a way that you can have enough to get the job done. So that's what I'd say there. Now, let me go back on the coaching and mentoring, because there was a lot there that we kind of glossed over. One thing I encourage folks to do always is look at the leaders in your life, wherever they are. Work, obviously, but, you know, and what is it that you find appealing about a leader? And what is it that you find not appealing about leaders? Okay. And like, incredible charisma and communication skill attracts most people. Blame game is going to be not attractive to most people. But there's all kinds of things, you know, just a wizard in their space, so compassionate to people, empathetic, whatever they are. But evaluate those things that attract you or don't to leaders. Evaluate yourself. Say, well, you know, I'm attracted to these things. Well, how am I in those? And use your 360s to find out, you know, your 360 reviews, how you are on that. And then, to the point of how you go about getting a coach or mentor, I want to say this. Technically, there is a difference between a coach and a mentor, and the academics will say a mentor is like Yoda in Star Wars, someone that is the older, more experienced, all-knowing one that shows you the way of the Force. Whereas a coach is more someone that's going to, you know, maybe be a little bit more of a contemporary of yours, a little bit closer to you in the hierarchy, that's going to kind of help you solve your own problems with your own ideas. They kind of help you tease things out. When Rob does it, I don't distinguish. Now, I have some people that call me a coach, some that call me a mentor. What you try to do is be what the person needs you to be at that time. And it changes. Sometimes the same person, the role may be different from time to time. But as you look at these people that are above you in the organization, or even at grade with you, depending, but you know, someone that you look at as someone that I think that person, I really admire that person. I'd like to be able to talk to that person, reach out to them and see if they would be willing to have a meeting with you and possibly develop a relationship. Some of the agencies, and I think some of this might have been in the chat, it was very hurried, I was seeing it. Some agencies actually have matching programs. Someone will go and they'll say, I want to be a coach or mentor. And someone will say, I want to coach or mentor. And then they'll kind of say, well, what are you strong in? What are you looking for? And they may give you 2 or 3 people to go talk to. And then ultimately to select one, and they may establish a formal agreement and so forth and so on. So it varies, but it can be very informal. Most of my arrangements are informal and variable, depending on what the person needs at the time and how often. So there's plenty of ways to do it, but part of it is having the courage to reach out to someone and say, hey, are you willing to help me? A question, how to be a supervisor to the same GS level? You know, this comes up a lot. There's a thing called grade stacking. You know, it's unavoidable because there just aren't enough grades in the system to differentiate all the levels of an organization. So for example, you know, in professional series in headquarters, for example, most managers are 14s or up. Well, so you only got 14, 15 in SES to accommodate what could be a dozen levels in the organization. Okay, so you end up with same graded people, but one is the boss. And what I say to that is, you know, at that point, by the time you're a 14 or a 15, and I was a 14 once, and I was first a 14 supervised by a 14, and then I was a 14 supervising 14s because I switched. The bottom line is you are established as the higher level supervisor. So everyone shouldn't really be focused on the grades day to day. They should be focused on the work and respect the authority as it's set up. So what I say, you should lead the proper way. You shouldn't be like, well, look, we're both 15s, but I'm the big one. You shouldn't do that. You should just, you should embrace your role as the senior at that grade. The others should embrace your role as a senior, and you go about the business at hand. It's unavoidable that you will not be in this situation at some point. Almost unavoidable. I've certainly been in it. I mean, technically I'm in it now, right? I mean, I'm a senior executive, but my boss is a higher level senior executive. That's it. So, and you know, my deputy is a senior executive, but I'm the higher level senior. In both our, it works fine. If people do the right things, and if you really are focusing on the relationship aspect, you're not going to have any of these problems because you're focused on making sure that harmony exists, compatibility exists, and the focus is on really organizational priorities. Kim?
So I just want to say thanks to everyone. If you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And Rob has included his information here. As you heard, he'll be retiring at the end of this month. So I just want to give a huge congratulations to him for his almost 35 years of federal service. And I'm so glad that you could be here today, and you've won the award for the number of presentations that you've done for the seminar series, and we're really grateful to have you today. If anyone has any additional questions for Rob, please send me an email or reach out to him directly. So thanks, everyone.
Kim, thank you so much. It's been a joy to work with you. I thank all the folks that joined today, and I hope they walk away with something that lasts forever. Thanks so much.